I just got out of watching Captain America Brave New World, and my mind is racing with thoughts right now. My brain is about to explode out of my head like the leader with how many things I want to say, and that seems to be in right now, so I don't really mind it. For real though, I don't think you'll be able to find a bigger Captain America fan than me. Some might prefer to use the term unhealthy obsession, but there's nothing that they can do to stop me as I only grow to love this character more and more. So to say that I was excited for this movie is the understatement of the century. My favorite superhero is finally back on the big screen for the first time in almost 6 years, and nearly 4 years since Sam Wilson became the Star-Spangled Man with a Plan. I've waited a painfully long time to say this, but I have finally seen Captain America Brave New World, and let me tell you, I really liked it. It's a fun, intense political thriller that shows you why Sam deserves to be a face of the MCU. Packed with some exciting action and an engaging story, I had the biggest smile on my face. It's really worth the watch and a movie that is very special to me. But here's the thing. I'll be the first one to admit that it's not without its problems. The story can be a little messy at times, and there are some jarring effects shots, but I'll dive more into my problems with the film in a little bit. Right now, I'm just so happy. This movie is a long time coming and something I've championed through thick and thin. I've practically become the Captain America guy now with how many videos I've made on him, and I'd honestly have it no other way. I've honestly never been this nervous to make a video before, because I feel like with a movie I've been looking forward to so much, I have so many things I want to say, and so many different thoughts on what worked really well, what could have used some more work, and I don't know if I'll be able to properly put that all into words, and I just want to be able to do my thoughts on this movie justice, so please bear with me. I don't have a script for this. This is all just going to be off the top of my head with a few notes, because I have a lot to say that I cannot wait any longer to talk about. And also, this video is going to be spoiler-free for the most part, but don't worry, I'll let you know when I'm going to talk about spoilers towards the end. Okay, I really need to get started now, because knowing me, this video is about to be probably an hour long comfortably, but without further ado, let's just jump right into this. I'm going to start with the positive because I have a lot more good things to say about this movie than any negatives I'll have in the back half of this video. What I love the most about Brave New World is that it is a Sam Wilson movie first and foremost, and that makes me very happy. It's really hard to actually verbalize this stuff because I'm feeling just so overwhelmed with emotion right now. As a massive Captain America fan, I've said it before, I'll say it again as many times as you're willing to hear it, but Sam Wilson is my favorite superhero. No, Sam Wilson is my favorite character right now. I would take a bullet for him and kill as many people as possible just to put a smile on his face. I adore this character and everything he stands for, so to finally see him get an opportunity to step up into the spotlight and lead his own movie means the absolute world to me. It's something I've been looking forward to for a long time, and that aspect of the film did not disappoint in the slightest. I really enjoy seeing what they do with Sam here and how he deals with the after effects of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, where he's now stepped up into the role of Captain America, meaning that when there's a global conflict arising and America's at the center of it, he feels like it's his job to stop that and do what he can to make sure that nobody's being hurt and help as many people as he can, because he's a good person and wants to properly utilize the responsibility that comes with wielding the shield. It's a very powerful symbol, and that weight is not lost on Sam at all throughout the entire movie. So many people, myself included to an extent, were concerned that the Hulk characters would take up too much space and would feel more like a Hulk movie that shoehorned in Sam Wilson's Captain America. I'm very happy to report that couldn't be further from the truth. Sam is undoubtedly at the center of this whole movie. It is his story through and through, but they do it in a very natural way. The way he gets entangled in this story in the first place makes a lot of sense for the direction that the MCU is going, and is a good jumping off point for Sam as Captain America. It's not like Marvel wanted to make a Hulk movie and just threw Captain America in there for the sake of it. This is very clearly all about Sam Wilson. He just happens to be fighting Hulk villains, and I think that's fine. I honestly really like the idea of mixing characters around. It's a huge benefit of the cinematic universe. Like, yeah, I'm sure there are some Captain America villains you could have brought in for this that would feel right at home, but I also think it's cool to try and do something new and bring characters together that wouldn't otherwise interact. I also think that with this movie and how they're making an effort to put Sam out of his element and out of his depth, it makes sense that you'd put him against characters he wouldn't otherwise be facing. It's a part of the narrative as he's fighting Hulk characters and struggles with these powerhouses both mentally and physically, and I think that works very well for his arc overall. The way this movie weaves that narrative together, that dynamic feels real and authentic as they build off of Sam and Ross's pre-established relationship from movies like Captain America Civil War in really new and exciting ways. It feels like the obvious next step for these two characters and presents a conflict that we haven't seen before in the MCU as he has to step up to fight the actual president, which is very fitting for a Captain America movie. Not only do you get to see Sam question the president's decision-making, but at the end of the film, he gets to actually square up with him. It's the best of both worlds to lean into that political thriller tone they're going for, while also giving us some spectacular action sequences. But it's entirely entirely fueled by Sam's own arc throughout the film. He's very clearly the heart of this movie and easily the best part of the entire thing. Coming out of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Sam stepped up into the role of Captain America and took up the responsibility that that mantle would bring. Sam spent the entirety of that show debating if he was the right man to take up the shield. And obviously by now we all know that he does take up that shield because Steve chose him for a reason. And seeing what happens when that shield ends up in the wrong hands, he knows he can't let that happen again and has to do the hard thing and step up to be this Captain America, no matter how many people hate him for it. So now as we enter this movie, we're seeing a version of Sam who's been Captain America for, I believe, 2 years now, they've said. He started getting the hang of it and has been doing this for a while, but that weight still hangs on him as he's finally thrown into a situation where he may be in over his head. But what I love about this movie is that it cements him as Captain America in the most satisfying possible way. We see him struggle with his past decisions and as he doubts himself and wonders if taking the serum was the right move after all. To him, he's just a regular guy. How is he supposed to fight in this insurmountable war when the people he cares about are being hunted down because they choose to associate with him and he can only do so much to protect them? And then you go out of your way to throw a raging Red Hulk into this? I mean, it's crazy how stacked against him things are in this film. But like any good Captain America would, Sam does not back down from the challenge. He steps up and faces it head on because he needs to be that symbol. If he's not on point for even a moment, people will jump on him. He's more than just a sidekick now. He's a symbol for the entire globe. And you really start to see him crack under the pressure of just being a normal guy in this world of gods and monsters. But he just keeps getting up in the most inspiring way and does it in a way that only Sam Wilson could. And by the way, I have to give Anthony Mackie a ton of credit because he is giving a career performance here. I feel like a lot of the time he's typecast as this silly wisecracking guy. And don't get me wrong, he is incredible at that. His comedic timing and delivery is great. But one of the best parts of Falcon and the Winter Soldier is that we got to dive deep into who Sam Wilson is as a person. We get to learn more about his backstory, meet his family, see exactly what makes him tick. And I like that this movie continues that, as we get to see Sam at the center of it all with these complex emotions being highlighted here. And Anthony brings that to life in a very authentic way, and manages to make you feel for this character in a whole new sense. He might be making quips and jokes at times, but that tension and pressure he's under never feels lost because of the way he's able to balance that kind of nuance in his character and his performance. I mean, come on, he holds his ground and stands out in scenes with Harrison Ford. You have to be doing a great job if you're able to keep up with Harrison Ford of all people. It just continues to prove that he was the perfect person to take on this mantle because he embodies what Captain America should in every single way. He's more than just a silly side character, as we have to see him struggle with the idea of being good enough in this ever-expanding multiverse. It grounds him in reality and makes him feel like a relatable everyman should. I think my favorite thing about Sam's character in this movie is how he approaches things through empathy. Steve Rogers was an act first, ask for permission kind of guy. His first instinct was to always jump into battle and fight the good fight. But Sam is very different, and he's very clearly his own person in this movie. I really like how they handle his character and have him be someone whose first instinct is to always talk people down and try and communicate with them rather than punching his way out of a situation. Obviously, going back to his counseling days at the VA, it makes sense for his character, but it's a fantastic way to show his compassion, which is something that you need to do when you're playing a character like Captain America. There are some moments in this movie that I really appreciate, like when Sam is on a mission to retrieve something, and instead of continuing the mission, he stops things to help the people involved. And I think little moments like that really sell this character and how his priorities are always going to be the people. Items can be replaced, but people can't, and Sam Wilson embodies that idea as he does whatever he can to help anybody. And I think that is such a powerful part of his character that this movie does a fantastic job of showing you. They're not telling you he's this righteous good man. You see it in his actions as he does everything he can to be the hero he knows he needs to be. And it's in those little details that show just how different he is to Steve, but in a very good way. It would be so boring if they just turned Sam Wilson into Steve Rogers again and we got the same kind of character arc. Sam is someone who's out here dealing with insecurities that Steve probably never did, especially to this extent that Sam does. The constant inadequacies as people are beating him down and he's starting to lose, while he has to force himself to get back in the fight and make sure he stands for what's right, no matter how hard it is and no matter how hard it hurts him, is beautiful, and I absolutely love that. He's not just some replacement for the mantle. Sam Wilson is his own character and someone who deserves to wield the shield more than anyone. There's no character in the MCU better fit to be Captain America and be someone for the American people to appreciate as an icon and a symbol for the country and what it should represent. A very apt comparison this movie makes is the fact that people look up to Steve Rogers, but they aspire to be Sam Wilson. Steve Rogers was this larger-than-life hero, and someone you can't exactly just wake up one day and try to be. But Sam Wilson is a realistic person, He's a guy who just happened to go on a run one day, and now he has to fight a Hulk president. He's a normal person put into this extraordinary scenario, but through his own strengths and willpower, he's able to do these impossible tasks because he's a good man deep down, and I really like how this movie highlights that. I know reviews for this movie are all over the place, but one thing I've really appreciated is how many people love Anthony Mackie's performance and Sam Wilson's character in this film. He's clearly the standout of the movie, and nobody disagrees, which is very nice to see and gives me a lot of faith that this is the start of even better things to come in his future. It really feels like Sam Wilson's career in the MCU has just gotten this big burst of energy into a second life where he can become something more than he once was, and I'm very much so looking forward to that in the future. But right now, I'm just happy to see them handling his character so well. It makes me incredibly happy as a lifelong Captain America fan, because if nothing else, I was just hopeful that this movie would do my man justice, and they absolutely did. And also, to break out of that very long section on his characterization real quick, I loved the way he fights in this movie. His movements and strategies and fight patterns are different from anyone else in the MCU, which makes the action scenes in this film feel very distinct. There's a few different ways he does fight too, which I think goes a long way to show just what kind of combatant Sam Wilson is in a very rewarding way. You've got your basic hand-to-hand fight scenes in this movie that I think are really smooth. There are a few moments that could have been tightened up a bit, but besides that, they're all very enjoyable. The hand-to-hand combat is very different from the previous movies, so I think if you're going into this film expecting Winter Soldier level action, you're going to be disappointed, but I actually like that it's different than that. I sound like a broken record at this point, but Sam is very different than Steve, so he should have a different fighting style than him. I like how Sam moves in this movie because he fights like a real person would. The only difference is he has years of training with this shield and gets very crafty with it in some very exciting ways that I think pay off very well. There are some hand-to-hand fight scenes in this movie that I think are genuinely really good that I love to see. The way they show Sam practicing to fight against these insurmountable odds and only to pay it off by using his speed and strategy to outwit other people works very well for his character. And I think that's what's most important for me. You can tell they put a lot of thought into these fight scenes, and for me, that works really well when it backs up what makes Sam such a special character. So even something as a simple hand-to-hand fight scene never loses sight of the fact that he's just a regular guy doing his best. And sometimes he gets put in situations where he has to hold his own when the odds are insurmountable, and I love seeing the crafty ways he gets out of situations. There's a particular moment in this movie that I really love where Sam is caught in an ambush without his gear, and we see him have to fight his way out of this situation in ways we never have had to before in the MCU. Ever since we've known Sam Wilson, he's only ever been using his wings to fly around and shoot people and kick people, which is fun in its own way, but after a while, you kind of have to differentiate that to show how he's grown over the years. There's only been like one or two fight scenes off the top of my head where Sam is actively fist fighting people, but even then, it's an even fight. In this film here, we see Sam outgunned and outclassed, and he has to use only his wits and strategies to get out of these situations, and I think they do such a great job of using the action to bolster up this character and show what makes him so cool. But then when we do see him using the wings, he's using them in such fun and creative ways that is a joy to watch on screen. Whether it be using them as a shield or clotheslining people with them, and it's not like Sam is being entirely controlled and assisted by technology to where he's just a guy in a suit that's doing all the work. No, that's not it at all. This is very clearly someone who knows what they're doing with these wings and is using them to his full advantage, which I cannot get enough of. I would happily watch 2 hours of him bashing people over the head with his wings. It is so satisfying and so much fun to enjoy. But I think the real standout for me are the flying scenes in this film. I love to see this high-speed dogfight style action as Sam is in the air, being able to just fully embrace being this new Captain America and do things how he wants to. We see him crashing through planes and dodging and weaving through these tight scenarios, all while actively trying to stop a war from happening, which is one of the most thrilling sequences in the entire movie. I think it's much more interesting to put Sam and Joaquin in this context together, where they're not exactly fighting people in the air, but they're trying to de-escalate a situation in a way where it doesn't result in global catastrophe. It adds a lot of tension to the film because we know if they mess up, things could go south very fast. For me, what really works about this entire airborne sequence is the scale and spectacle of it all. I can't tell you enough how much I love the inclusion of Tiamat in this movie, not just because I'm a diehard Eternals fan, which definitely is a part of the reason, but I think the inclusion of this landmass in the ocean and seeing how that would change the world and the political climate as people fight for these resources is not only a really smart addition to the story, but the overall scale it brings to this film as we see Sam flying around it and through the fingertips of the Celestial. It's so fun to watch and creates this really exciting visual spectacle that you want to see on the biggest screen possible. It's a really unique setting that you're not going to see anywhere else that makes narrative sense in this movie for the political climate they're going for, and also gives us, inarguably, I'd say, the best airborne action scene in the entire MCU. I think this clears all the other ones out of the water. It is so thrilling to watch. The way his dynamic with Joaquin is operating, all while the tension builds throughout this moment. I wish it lasted for another hour because I was having such a fun time watching it. I need to rewatch this movie as soon as possible just so I can see this one sequence again. It is worth the price of admission alone and will not disappoint. I understand why they're marketing it so heavily in the trailers because it is really such a drawing point of this film. It's creative and exhilarating action that you can't get anywhere else than in a movie like this. They really cooked here. And I think that as the MCU expands, you kind of need to carve your own niche. Putting Sam Wilson at the forefront of his own franchise, where you can expect some high-quality, high-speed dogfight action in a political thriller tone, is the exact right move to do. And I am praying that we get to see more of that in the future. If Marvel takes the wrong lesson away from what people say about this movie and takes Sam Wilson away from me as Captain America, or we don't get to see him have his own trilogy, I'm making the national news and you're never going to hear from me again, because that would be the worst thing ever. The lesson from this movie should be that Sam Wilson is a fantastic character and deserves his story to be told to completion. But I've held out on talking about one fight until the end here, which is the big climactic battle with Red Hulk. For a lot of people, I feel like they might be disappointed because the marketing makes it seem like he's in this movie a lot more than he actually is. But for me, I really vibe with the way they handle him in this film. The fight feels earned over the course of these 2 hours as you build up to it, treating this character like a powder keg about to explode at any moment. Most of the tension from this movie comes from the fact that the Red Hulk is going to erupt at any moment, and they build up to it in a really natural way that boils over and taunts you with something that, if it happens, spells catastrophe for not just Captain America, but the entire world to an extent. And I think that right there is the most interesting thing you could do with this character. The movie builds and builds and builds into this crescendo where the Red Hulk has to come out, and we're forced to see Sam confront this monster and see how he handles a situation like this. Something he's never been put in before, that he's way in over his head on. And for me, that fight did not disappoint at all. The slow burn build to that moment pays off in the most spectacular way. It's much less a fight, more so than it is Sam just trying to do his best to survive this beast, trying to rip him in half. And that kind of tension and suspense bleeds really well into the political thriller tone they're going for here. To me, you come to this movie for the conspiracy, and as you unravel this mystery, it all leads to this big battle with the Red Hulk that is a joy to watch. I could not get enough of it, and I think that they used him a perfect amount in this film. That's probably going to end up being a hot take, but for me, they knew exactly what they were doing here. Especially seeing the way Sam fights against him, where he's just trying his best to outsmart and outlast this unstoppable force of nature, while he tries to use his real superpower of empathy to connect with this rage monster and bring him down to earth. I felt like he was used a perfect amount that enhanced the story they were telling. Incredible battle at the end of the film. And I'm happy with that, especially with how good it makes Sam look, which is always going to be my priority at the end of the day. And while we're talking about Red Hulk, to absolutely nobody's surprise, Harrison Ford is incredible in this movie. I don't think that man has ever turned in a truly bad performance from what I've seen at least, but he's really giving it all and fully committing to this character. He could have easily just turned this into a paycheck movie and done the bare minimum because he's Harrison Ford. He's gonna sell tickets on name value alone. But no, you can tell he really wanted to dive into the sandbox and enjoy the MCU for all that it could be. You see him fully embrace some of the more absurd elements of this film, like a Hulk transformation, but he goes all in and sells it to the best of his capabilities to where you truly believe this man is about to turn into a giant rage monster. As you track his character throughout the movie, going from someone who's just trying to do his best to unite the country to a guy with very clear rage issues and watching things not go his way and how that affects him mentally when he's just trying to do things for a reason I won't get into right now, but you can watch in real time it affect him more and more and more until he just can't contain himself. And then when he does get to those really tense moments, he's stealing scenes and giving you line deliveries that only someone like Harrison Ford could pull off. Whether it be unleashing the amount of rage he probably gets when being asked about Star Wars, to selling these deep emotional moments that I wasn't expecting to see out of him, he goes out of his way to make this role as good as it could be. And honestly, this is the most I've ever enjoyed Thunderbolt Ross as a character. I think that before this, it was obviously in Civil War, but outside of that, he doesn't get too much to do. In Incredible Hulk, he feels a little too generic for me, as an angry general just trying to stop the Hulk. And he's got some interesting appearances in Infinity War and Black Widow, but here, he finally gets to be a character in a sense that you understand his motivations. You understand what drives him and why he's made these steps he has in his life, to where he's got this position of power now that I don't think any of us saw coming a few years ago, to where he's the president of the United States. And now he has to deal with the pressure that comes with being in charge of the most powerful country on the planet. And it's not made easier when you're a ticking time bomb bound to go off. There's a new added sense of depth and humanity to this character that paints him as almost a tragic figure and someone that I couldn't help but sympathize with. And for the tone this movie is going for, where they're really trying to draw out the tension and have you on the edge of your seat waiting for what's going to happen at the next moment, I think that was a brilliant move to turn the Red Hulk into a sympathetic character, because you almost don't want him to turn into the Red Hulk throughout the movie. The marketing focuses so heavily on this character becoming this unstoppable rage monster that's going to fight Captain America in this spectacular action scene to be remembered for the ages, but by the time he starts transforming into the Red Hulk, they've done such a great job of layering this character with much needed depth and backstory that you're kind of hoping he doesn't. And I think that's a great sign of any good character development, and I have to credit most of that to Harrison Ford's performance. He sells emotional moments with a shakiness in his voice and really has you believing that this guy is a real person who genuinely feels these things. I think the main reason this character works for me is that they're building off of his history with Sam in the MCU in a very natural way. Obviously, these are two characters who have had their problems in the past, and they're not afraid to admit that. They clearly don't trust each other and still have their own problems, but they're doing what's best for the country and the people they both want to protect. So we watch them build this uneasy alliance, but just because they're working together at the start doesn't mean that they have to like each other, as we see these two butt heads and have this antagonistic relationship where they're clearly trying to do the right thing while also getting under each other's skin and not trusting the other fully at all. Sam isn't just going to bend the knee because the president says so, when the president is someone who hunted him to the ends of the earth for years. He knows he has to trust his moral compass, but now you see Thunderbolt Ross actually trying to be better and make up for the many mistakes in his past. And it puts Sam in this position where he's someone who always tries to find the best things in people. And now he's seeing someone who he never saw anything good in before, but actually start to develop that kind of empathy for him and sympathize with what he's gone through while still having to deal with this very antagonistic force against him. And I think it creates this really electric dynamic between the two. They take the relationship we saw briefly before in other movies and expand on that in a way that makes sense for both of these characters and is very engaging to watch. Honestly, if this movie was just 2 hours of them talking in a room debating on the ethics of being a superhero and how they want to handle the country going forward, I wouldn't be making this video right now because I would be in the theater watching that on loop endlessly. They have such a compelling dynamic with incredible chemistry together and are pros at building tension. It is so fun to just watch them go at each other and play off of that relationship in a really interesting way. With a lesser actor in the role, I don't think they would have been able to pull it off this well, to where it sells that powder keg tension as at any moment things could spiral out of control and go wrong, and he's a very instrumental part of making that happen. And I mean, yeah, would it have been nice to see more of the Red Hulk in this movie? Of course, I'm not going to turn down another scene with him, but I think that his character works so well because of the way they build him up and the satisfying arc he has by the end of the movie. Also, just not to take things for granted for a second, but like, do you know how cool it is that we have Harrison Ford in the MCU now? Growing up, he was my favorite actor. Before the MCU kicked off and I was an obsessive Marvel fan, I watched the Indiana Jones movies on loop. So this is an incredibly full circle moment for me and something that I'm convinced they did for me alone. It feels like fan fiction that I could say I watched a Captain America movie with Harrison Ford as the villain. That's so cool, man, and it's made even better by the fact that they don't waste this opportunity at all. Every scene he's in is so enjoyable and made even better by the way that he's a foil to Sam Wilson's character. Those two characters and performances make this movie as good as it is. Easily the two biggest standouts of the entire film, and I give them full credit for doing everything they can to make it work. Also, real quick, I need to give a ton of praise to Danny Ramirez because I love Joaquin Torres so much. We got a little bit of a taste of him in Falcon and the Winter Soldier as Sam's guy in the chair and someone who worked as a contact for him, but in this movie, he really shines, and it's entirely due to performance alone, honestly. He is so incredibly charming. I can't tell you enough how I had the biggest smile on my face anytime he did literally anything on screen. He's just a silly little guy doing his best, trying to become the new Falcon, and I think he makes a fantastic addition to the MCU. He feels a lot less like a replacement for the Falcon and more so like a new character as a whole, which works so well. I think that what makes him so enjoyable in this movie is his dynamic with Sam, because first and foremost, they have some incredible chemistry together. It feels like two friends talking in the way that they bounce off of each other, and the way that Sam is constantly making jokes about Joaquin, and the way that they annoy each other. They kind of have this brotherly bond in a way that feels real and authentic, and I love it so much. I really hope that we get to see them so much more in the MCU together, because they are such a joy to watch and see them interact and be so playful with each other. But he's exactly the kind of character you want to have in a sidekick, as someone who feels reliable and genuine and has this actual connection with Sam that isn't forced at all. They really feel like two people who have known each other for a long time and care about each other. What I like about their dynamic most, though, is how Sam mentors him and actually steps up into this role as a teacher for once. He's no longer just the guy taking order. Now being Captain America, he's the one giving them. And for someone who's unsure about if the Avengers need to return, let alone if he should be the one to lead them, it's kind of a trial to see how he mentors Joaquin from a guy in the chair to now someone who actually wants to step into the field. And obviously, Sam has his own fair share of experience working with a wingman before in the past, and it didn't go well. You can clearly tell he's apprehensive about wanting to let Joaquin into his life like this. But he's just so damn charming that Sam can't say no, and you get to see this bond grow throughout the movie to this brotherly relationship that I hope we get to see a lot more of. They can have such a bright future together in the MCU if Marvel plays their cards right, but especially Danny Ramirez, I feel like it's a no-brainer to include him in more things. And speaking of characters who make a great inclusion to the MCU, I can't really remember the transition I made before. But Giancarlo Esposito's Sidewinder is a great addition to the MCU. I was very interested to see the kind of role he would have in this film, with him obviously being the one big thing they added in those faded reshoots that have forever changed my life and the reception this movie is going to get, because people don't understand how a film is made. But anyways, I feel like you can't even tell that they reshot him into this movie. His inclusion feels so necessary in the plot of this film, and he was a really surprising standout for me. He's a character who on the surface is kind of one note in this mercenary role, but it's the way he plays him with this confidence and cunning ability to get out of any situation by putting himself first that I really enjoy his presence in the movie. He's in arguably my favorite action scene of the entire film, and is someone who I'm very glad they added to the movie. And me personally, I couldn't even see the seams of where they cut him into the film. He's a very fun dynamic with Sam and some other characters here, and is someone who I wasn't expecting to like as much as I did coming out of the movie. He's effortlessly cool and intimidating, and has that aura you want in a mercenary villain. It all comes down to Giancarlo's performance. Everybody knows how good he is playing a villain, and I think here it's such a natural inclusion to bring him in. And as much as the wrestling fan in me misses what could have been with Seth Rollins' King Cobra that they cut out of the movie for this, I think that his scenes add a lot. So I'm happy that they made these changes, and I feel like they made the right call. Not only does he help add to this tense story they're setting up, but he does it in a way that's very unpredictable and shakes up the movie in a way that I think is really satisfying. I'm glad to be surprised by this character, because in the back of my head, part of me was a little worried that he would feel forced into the film and it wouldn't make any sense, or they wouldn't have been able to make him interesting. But I think that he is a very fun character to watch. I think they made the most of with his little screen time. Special shout out to Isaiah Bradley real quick. Carl Lumley plays this character so well, and he's very quickly become one of the best post-Endgame MCU characters. Really, he's the emotional core of this film. They had me tearing up at points with how well they handled his character arc. He really ties together the political thriller vibes the film is going for, and I feel like they build off of Falcon and the Winter Soldier in a really interesting way. At the end of that show, we see Isaiah finally come out of hiding as the world embraces him and honors him for his years of service and tries to do their best to make up for the torture they put him through. And now in this movie, we get to see a very different side of Isaiah. We get to see someone who's almost found his joy again, as he gets to kind of reclaim his life in a way. And I think that what works so well about his character in this movie is how he responds to the ongoing situations that are being developed between something like Sam and Ross's dynamic, where Isaiah clearly doesn't trust Ross, and Sam wants to give him a second chance. And we see what happens when Isaiah reluctantly does give him that second chance to trust Sam, and because of that, he ends up in prison. Just as he's starting to put himself back in the world, he loses everything, and it's all because of Sam and his innate nature to want to do good, that he gets caught in the crossfire. It's a very tragic moment, and it kind of creates this divide between the two characters, as Sam is now trying to do everything he can to fight for Isaiah and try and win him back over, and to prove that he knows what he's doing. It's a really powerful story, and you can feel every single emotional beat just from the performances alone. And that's all stuff from the trailers. I'm not spoiling anything for you, unless you didn't watch any of the trailers because you wanted to go into the movie blind, but it's like, what are you doing watching a review video, man? You should know better than that. That's not on me. You can't hold that against me. But we see him forced to assassinate the president, which is kind of a big deal. And we see him come to grips with that, where life was finally going good for him. And against his will, out of his control, it's stripped away from him and taken away for someone else's agenda as they try and put Isaiah back in this box. And now it's up to Sam, who feels guilty for what's happened to Isaiah, as someone who brought him out of hiding. Sam went out of his way to let the country show Isaiah the love and appreciation he deserved, to try and do what he can to make up for all that lost time. And now seeing it result in this tragic imprisonment and how that affects both Isaiah and Sam is really fascinating to watch. I think that his dynamic with Sam here is stronger than ever. And God, like, Carl Lumley's performance here is so good. In the little facial expressions, the tone of his voice, the way he sells the emotion in these scenes, where he feels like someone who is truly scared that he may lose his life and everything he's built up and fought for to get to the position he's in. It's beyond tragic seeing him like this, but I think it flows really well with the overall narrative of the film, and they do a great job of building up Isaiah as this character of great importance and someone who means the world to Sam. And I think that that almost mentor-mentee relationship they have with each other, as Sam is trying to learn from Isaiah and also get this other perspective of the country to help him stay on guard and kind of be ready for all these different scenarios, works really well. And I think that he brings a lot to this movie. Honestly, I wish we could have gotten a little more of him, just because I think he's so compelling as a character. I always want to see what he's doing because he sells every scene he's in with so much raw emotion, and you really feel for this guy as someone who's had his life taken away from him. So I think that they do a great job building on top of his arc from Falcon and the Winter Soldier and really cementing this as a political thriller with him. There are two overwhelming themes from this film: the idea of legacy and empathy. Legacy is far and away the strongest part of this movie, whether it be the way that Thunderbolt Ross is trying to deal with his legacy and the things he's done in the past and how he's trying to atone for his sins, while certain characters are trying to make sure that he never forgets what he's done and expose him for the fraud he is. And then obviously the biggest one of all is Sam Wilson taking up the shield and becoming the new Captain America, as he's now had time filling in those boots that Steve Rogers left and trying to walk with them but in his own way and live up to the impossible weight of that mantle and what that means to be Captain America. Even to a lesser extent, you have Joaquin becoming the new Falcon and someone who is doing their best to step up and fill that role and be there for Sam when he clearly needs it. And I think that the idea of legacy is done very well in this movie. It builds off the themes of Falcon and the Winter Soldier in a very natural way and expands on them in a movie setting that introduces these new characters where you can look at the ideas of legacies and our past and what we leave behind as we try and march towards this new future in a very interesting way. And then there's obviously the idea of empathy, which is impossible to escape with Sam Wilson. Being empathetic is basically his greatest superpower. And seeing how empathy triumphs overall is maybe the biggest takeaway from this movie and something that viewers can actually achieve themselves. Obviously, you can't take on the legacy of a wartime president or Captain America, but if we all come out of this movie a little more empathetic and able to look at the world through someone else's perspective and try and open ourselves up to being helpful and compassionate, I think this movie's done its job. And while we're talking about the tones and themes of this film, I do want to mention that for a political thriller, I think they do a good job with the whole building tension aspect of the thing. But one thing I would critique about the film is that it doesn't really take that much of a political stance. For a movie that champions itself as a political thriller, I would say it's more so that tonally than thematically. As much as I would have liked to see some messaging, but I have to destroy the whole system and burn it down and stuff like that, that would have been great. But I would say that there's just much more of a heavy emphasis on the thriller aspect of that than the political nature of the movie. They're much more concerned with these characters and their mental state than they are the actual US political system. And that idea is where this movie excels for me. One thing I've seen an annoying amount of discourse on is the fact that they didn't include the Marvel Studios fanfare at the beginning of the film. The big long intro where you see all these dazzling characters. It's one of the biggest joys in my life, but this movie doesn't include that. It instead opts for the very simple Marvel Studios Presents title card, and I don't have a problem with that. I think it's interesting to see them do different things and adapt that logo in a way that fits the tone they're trying to achieve here. I absolutely miss that big fanfare, and I feel like there's a way they could have done both, but I don't think it's a big deal. Like, a lot of people are pretending it's the end of the world online when it's a creative choice made to immerse you more in this serious tone, and I think that's a great idea. Because this movie, while it has its jokes and some very funny moments in it, it's a lot more serious than I was expecting it to be. Some of the trailers made it seem like it was a very goofy movie. Not that one. And I really enjoyed how they could lock in at times and really sell you on the implications of what's happening. I also think that all in all, the movie looks very pretty. I feel like that's going to be a hot take, but more often than not, this movie is shot very well. Julius Ona is doing a great job directing, and I think that the colors all pop very well on screen. They're not muted at all like we have seen in past Captain America films. I feel like being able to see this bright red, white, and blue contrast against the background, or fighting in this pink cherry blossom forest, or even something as simple as the film grain on screen goes a long way in making this movie have a distinct visual style, and I like to see that. It's actual creative choices being made by the director, and it goes a long way in making this movie stand out amongst other films in the MCU. That being said, there are some very jarring green screen shots in this movie that stick out like a sore thumb. And I'm saying that because most of the time the movie looks very pretty and has some nice shots and cinematography. So when you get a shot that is clearly unfinished and they could have used more time to blend the actor with the background who show they're not just on a green screen, especially when it's in something like the big final fight, it's impossible to ignore and is very distracting. And I feel like people are going to cherry pick that to no end, but the rest of the movie looks good. And I just want to make that clear that the issue with this is that the movie looks really good 90% of the time. It's just the fact that every so often there will be a shot that is clearly green screened in and you can tell. I don't know if that's a victim of reshoots or the schedule they had to release this movie, but I just think it's important to note that it does not look perfect all the time and the green screen stuff can be very messy. Also, while we're talking about the technical things in this film, this movie is scored by Laura Cartman, the person who did The Marvels. This is a big change from basically every Captain America project in the MCU, from the original trilogy to Falcon and the Winter Soldier, as we say goodbye to Henry Jackman here, and I think his score is deeply missed. Not being able to hear Sam's Louisiana Hero theme in these big bombastic moments definitely does feel like a missed opportunity, but I understand why they went with Laura Cartman's score here, because her soundtrack fits the political thriller vibes very well. The soundtrack is constantly building tension and raising the stakes in a way that sounds like a genuine 70s political thriller would. The issue with that, though, is that while it may enhance the tension in some scenes, it comes at the cost of losing that iconic and very unique theme to Sam. It's nothing against Laura Cartman's score. She's doing exactly what they told her to do. I just wish that they could have found a way to weave in Henry Jackman's themes into this movie to make it stand out more. Alright, enough putting this off. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what I think doesn't work in this movie. I have two big problems with the film. The first is the character of Ruth Bat-Saraf. There's been a lot of very valid and understandable controversy around not just this character, but also the actress. So when she was announced for the cast list of this movie, people were rightfully concerned. I was not happy when they brought her out on stage and announced that she would be part of the movie all those years ago. She has no business being in a Captain America film in the first place. So I don't know what they were thinking putting her in this movie, especially with how problematic her origin is, but Marvel made it clear that they wanted to reinvent this character for the modern day, and I'm here to make it known that she is an absolute waste of time in this film. Why couldn't it have been someone actually important to the Captain America mythos like Misty Knight, Sam's most popular lover in the comics, or someone like Sharon Carter, whose ending was teased at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier and could have naturally been in this position as someone who worked their way back up into the government this high in the ranks and has an ulterior motive. And we can watch her in this movie knowing that she has something planned, and she still gets to have action scenes that make sense and is already coming into the movie with an interesting dynamic with Sam. But instead, we get a character who is so aggressively boring and caused so much understandable uproar that people were boycotting this film. It's crazy that they cuffed themselves to the idea of introducing Ruth and trying to turn her into a Black Widow, but also still making her from Israel. It's like they're trying to appease everyone, and in that regard, they appease no one, because this character is nothing. They reinvent her by making her so boring and bland and just generic Black Widow, and it's made even worse by the fact that she's played by a very bad actress. Oh my god, there were some times in the movie where I was genuinely concerned with how bad her acting was. I cannot believe Marvel vetted her, approved her to be in this movie, saw her performance and said, yeah, let's keep this, when she adds nothing to the film at all. She is constantly holding the movie back because she gets an embarrassing amount of screen time. She just kind of exists and does nothing worthwhile or interesting in the movie at all. From a completely objective standpoint, she doesn't even get a character arc. She's just kind of there, and for what? Marvel would have lost nothing if they took the time in reshoots to cut her out of the film and instead give her action scenes to someone like Layla Taylor. Zosha Rockmore also plays a security-based character in this movie for General Ross, so it's weird to me that they have two security characters in this film, and both of them don't really get to do enough that make them interesting. I think it would have been really smart to just cut Ruth from the movie and instead give her action to someone like Layla, who is actually a good actress, and I would have loved if we were able to see some depth for her. Merge those characters together and prop up Layla. Even make her someone like a love interest for Sam like she is in the comics. But it's just the fact that you have two characters who ultimately literally do nothing, and one of them is getting way too much screen time that holds the movie back a lot for me. At the end of the day, I'm just glad that she isn't some propaganda character trying to make you sympathize with a country of colonizers, but it's baffling to me that they included her in the movie in the first place, and there isn't even a reason to justify her inclusion because she's so nothing, and is giving the worst performance in the entire MCU. I honestly can't believe they wanted to die on the hill of keeping this character in the movie when she's not helping the film at all, she's barely pushing the plot forward in a way that another character could, and it feels like she's so interchangeable. That's the most negative you're going to hear me be in this review, but I'm just truly baffled at her inclusion in the movie. But I'm going to be honest with you guys, as much as I do love things like Sam's character arc and the action scenes in this movie, she holds the movie back by hogging up so much screen time that does nothing for the film. This is a character who adds nothing and an actress that drags that nothing down to being bad. And that sucks. Sam Wilson and Anthony Mackie don't deserve that. I think the other big issue with this movie is the pacing. This film is an hour 50 minutes, an hour 58 with credits. And compared to the other Captain America films, that's short. And intrinsically, I don't have a problem if your movie is short. Birds of Prey is one of my favorite superhero movies, and that's an hour and 49 minutes including the credits. You can tell a great story in a condensed runtime. But I think here, they needed like 15 to 20 more minutes to really let you feel the weight of this film and the implications of what can happen. It can move way too fast at times without enough time to just sit and breathe in the moment. I think the movie really picks up the most in the second act, and then when we enter the third act, it feels like they bump the speed up a lot to where you're just moving from moment to moment to moment to moment, to even when we do get a small moment where we can just sit with characters as they contemplate what's happening. The second that scene finishes, it immediately jumps into what's coming next. And I feel like with a thriller movie like this, you definitely needed some more time where we can just digest what's happening and process everything. Plus, there are a few instances in the film where characters are just kind of giving exposition, and I think it could have benefited if we actually saw those moments, where we could have seen flashbacks to build up to where we've gotten to this point, and just do a little more showing than telling us all these things. At times, the breakneck speed does work. It sells the urgency of war very well and helps build that tension, but at other times it feels like we're going way too fast, not getting enough time to process anything, as we jump from points A to C, completely skipping B, and I think the movie would have benefited a lot from those moments. And here's the thing, not even to do my silly bit, that was completely unintentional, but here's the thing about this movie. The way the movie's edited together, I don't think it's an issue with the reshoots or the overall narrative of the film that was on the script. I have a feeling they cut a lot of it out because there's a lot of stuff that they shot in the trailer that just isn't in this movie. And I was left wondering coming out of the theater where certain scenes were. I've watched these trailers probably hundreds of times, more than anybody on the planet, when I'm editing my many Captain America videos. So I noticed it much more than a lot of others when certain scenes just weren't in the film. Like this really cool shot here of a fight scene happening entirely in silhouette on shadows against the wall. That's just not in the movie. So I have to wonder, what pieces are we missing? What subplot did they cut out of this to tighten the pacing a little too much? And I feel like that's the movie I want to see, that takes this from good to great. Because again, I think this movie is good. I had a blast watching it. It's a very fun time, but you can't ignore structural issues like this. I don't know if it was a mandate or if it was a choice to try and make this movie flow fast to sell the urgency, but whatever it is, I think the film suffers a bit because of it. If this was even just like a 2-hour, 15-minute runtime and we get to edit those scenes back in, I feel like we could be looking at a completely different movie. As the massive Captain America fan I am, I just wish there was more in this movie. Not even saying that in like a cheeky way where like, oh man, the only problem I had was that there wasn't more Captain America. It's just that the movie did need more time. I honestly think that's the biggest issue plaguing it and holding it back from reaching its full potential. But I'm honestly just curious to see what the original version of this film was, because there's clearly some stuff missing. But there's so much more in this movie that's good than bad. It's got many flaws, but it also has heart. They really care about the character of Sam Wilson, and I love and appreciate that so much. Would I have loved if the movie was better? Of course. But sometimes a movie is just good, and that's fine. In a case like this, all I really wanted out of this movie was for them to handle Sam's character correctly and cement him as the Captain America right now. And they did just that. So in spite of its pacing issues, I still think that it's a very entertaining movie and a lot of fun to watch with some thrilling action scenes. It's got strong performances almost all around and some truly great character work between Anthony Mackie and Harrison Ford. Alright, I'm pretty sure by now you can tell my overall thoughts on this film. I've made it pretty clear that I think it's good and I like the movie, but it does have its issues. So now, without further ado, let's finally get into the spoilers because I have a lot that I want to talk about here. So here's your final warning. I'm going to talk about spoilers in 3, 2, One, I wasn't expecting Tiamat to come back to life with full frontal nudity, but I mean, hey man, whatever you gotta do to get butts in seat, I can't do this bit. Okay, for real, let's talk about the leader. The biggest mystery going into this film, and someone they consciously made an effort to avoid fully showing in all of the marketing. We didn't even know what his plan was going into this film. That being said, I'm very conflicted about the leader, because I think motivation-wise, he's great. But obviously, I feel like a lot of people are gonna focus on his design. And I think that's fair, because personally, I don't love it. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that merchandise came out showing him looking completely different in this movie. So I went into this with the expectation that the leader was going to look like a guy with a big, goofy forehead in the best possible way. I liked the design that we saw in the merch leaks very much. So I think that when the actual movie comes along and we see him with a rather small head, but this disgustingly mutated brain, it kind of took me back a bit. And that's me being a victim to expectations, along with the fact that some wires were crossed along the way, where Marvel clearly had a different idea for how the leader would operate in this film, and now he looks completely different. I don't know if that was a red herring on purpose, and I don't think that's bad. By the end of the movie, I had gotten used to it, and I do like his design. I just don't love it because I feel like when you're adapting a character like the leader, him having a big head is kind of his defining trait. So the fact that they gave him this mutated gamma-exposed brain, it took a lot of getting used to. And it's not a knock on the prosthetics at all. They are genuinely flawless. Hats off to literally everybody who worked on that character, because I love the fact that they, one, committed to prosthetics, and two, pulled it off that seamlessly to where he looks like a genuinely mutated person. He's honestly very upsetting to look at, with the way one of his eyes is sunken in, glowing, and his head kind of looks like it's melting as his brain bursts out, and ugh, it's just gross. So I think the design is good. I just think it would be better if they exaggerated it more. They're so close to getting the perfect leader design, and I do get that this is kind of inspired from some comics where instead of having a big forehead, he's more of this big brain exploding out of his head, and I think that they just had to lean into that more. But that being said, looking at this movie in a bubble, his design works very well for this take on the leader and the overall tone of the movie. Honestly, looking at this design again, I feel like him not having the goatee just feels like he's missing something. So give him like 3 more inches of head. Give him the goatee back, and I think that would be a genuinely really inspired take on the leader. But getting away from how he actually looks, let's talk about his motivations, because your boy got very close in his predictions video, which honestly, I was shocked at. And my predictions for the leader's motivation in this movie was that Ross blamed him for the Abomination incident and had him thrown in prison, and then used his genius for experiments. And while I wasn't exactly right with the whole Ross dying and needing heart pills type thing, and the leader slowly corrupting him over time to get his revenge in the long term, I think it's pretty impressive that I got that close. So I mean, I'm going to take credit for that one. And I think his motivation is very interesting because he's someone who could be a sympathetic and tragic figure, but they don't play it that way. For a little bit, you're given the idea that, oh, maybe this guy is doing it for the right reasons, but you very quickly realize just how unhinged he's become. And he honestly has a very sinister presence throughout the movie that I think works very well. I love the idea of him being so smart and calculating all these probabilities to where he calculates a 77% chance that Sam is going to try and de-escalate a situation with his empathy. I think that's fun comic book stuff here. And I think his plan is honestly smart in that he's using the technology he's gotten to break his way out of this prison cell and enact his revenge on Ross now that he's the president, and now that Ross didn't hold up his end of the bargain and give him his life back while the leader did everything he could to prolong Ross's. So I don't think his motivations and plan here are a problem at all. I would have liked to have seen more of them, and maybe we could have gotten some flashbacks or some more time with the leader to really see his mental state and understand why he is the way he is. And I think that if the movie was longer, that could have benefited from that. Like, there's one scene in the trailer that they cut out of him pushing through this crowd wearing an Uncle Sam hat. And that's one of the things where I feel like the movie could have benefited from including that. I don't really understand why they want to cut stuff out of the movie like that, but what do I know? Oh god. While we're talking about my predictions video with the thumbnail saying someone will die, I think it's kind of funny that the trailers all featured this funeral scene where Sam is in a sling at the end of the movie, and it's just not in the movie. I can't even be mad because that's just kind of funny. It feels like they did it to spite me, but I have to wonder what changed there. It makes me wonder if President Ross was supposed to die at one point in this movie, and they changed the ending to put him in the raft instead, which I'm fine with. I hope that this means we can see Harrison Ford come back as Ross in the future. I would love if we got a Thunderbolt sequel of him on the team. I think that'd be really cool. It all just depends on Harrison Ford's availability and if he even wants to do this again in the future, but they clearly left the door open for it. And honestly, the most unrealistic part of this whole movie isn't the fact that Captain America fights a giant red Hulk or anything crazy like that. No, no, no. It's the fact that the president took accountability for his actions after ruining Washington, D.C., which is unfortunately something that'll never happen. But we can dream. And I think that his reunion with Betty at the end of the film was genuinely really sweet and felt earned for his character. Using the cherry blossoms as this visual metaphor for their relationship as they fall from the sky and hit his red skin, burning from just the touch, to then Sam connecting with him on a human level, and a single cherry blossom resting in the palm of his hand, I think that's some really cool imagery and a great way to bring that environment into the actual storytelling of the film. And making his entire motivation about trying to win back Betty was a really good way to bring this character down to earth and humanize him in a way that I wasn't prepared for. But I think it's a really smart way to take this character and put a whole new spin on him and add this new element of actual tragedy where he's just trying to live and become the president so he can show his daughter he's changed, because ever since he hunted down the Hulk 16 years ago, he's regretted that decision and wants to prove to her that he's a different person and actually cares about her. And I think they handled that whole story very, very well. Also, one last thing on Ross, but I absolutely love the fact that we got one single scene of Harrison Ford actually wearing the mustache. I think that's such a fun little gag as you see him knock over the podium in this fit of rage. Obviously some foreshadowing for the end, but just seeing Harrison Ford commit to that level gave me complete faith right off the bat that he was going to do a fantastic job with this character, and he does. I still wish he had it for the entire movie, but at least we got it for this little cameo. And also, not to keep jumping around all over the place, but I'm very happy that Bucky was in this movie. Bucky showing up to comfort Sam is the kind of cameo that I want to see more of in the MCU, because it feels earned and natural. This is a character who would show up for Sam when he's at his worst and needs that kind of support. It makes sense and plays into Sam's arc in the film, as he needs to hear those words of reassurance to make sure that he didn't make the wrong decision. He's someone who Sam can trust in a time where basically everyone is acting erratic. And it just goes to prove even more that they have the best and most entertaining dynamic in the entire history of the MCU. There are no two characters who mean more to each other and have this natural chemistry than Sam and Bucky, and I'm so glad that we got to see him in this film. I will always have the biggest smile on my face seeing them together because their bromance is always a highlight of everything they do together, and I'm glad we didn't have to wait much longer for that reunion. Oh, also, I almost forgot. We have to talk about the post-credit scene of this movie. I think it's fine. I don't really love it. I don't really hate it. And I get what they're going for. And it's nice to see the MCU finally get some direction after the whole shakeup with Kang as we move towards fighting White Doctor Doom. But I feel like it also doesn't give us much new information besides telling Sam that someone is coming. But I think you could have better utilized it by having Sam visit Captain Marvel or even just a clip from Thunderbolts. I feel like would have been more effective. So I wouldn't say it's a bad scene. It's just kind of nothing. So where does this movie leave us off as we look forward towards the future of the MCU? I know I'm very biased, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that they're very clearly setting Sam Wilson up to be the leader of the Avengers going forward, which makes me the happiest person in the world. That is exactly the kind of spot he deserves to be in and should be in. If there's one big takeaway from this movie, it absolutely should be that Sam Wilson is an important character who the MCU needs to focus on more. So I'm very glad to see that they're clearly propping him up to be in that spot, and I hope that as we march towards Doomsday and Secret Wars, we see him step up even more into the spotlight. I am praying that Marvel let us get a trilogy for Sam's Captain America. I feel like we've hardly scratched the surface with his character, and there's so much more we can do that I am just begging them to take advantage of. As of recording, the movie is projected to make its entire budget back in the opening weekend alone, so I'm glad it's not going to be a flop. I just hope that this means that we're going to see more Sam Cap in the future. I've already got a dozen different pitches in my mind that I'm sure you're going to see on the channel in the coming weeks, but I would love to see a Captain America 5 where we see Sam properly face the Serpent Society, as they've been teased for so long, and now we have this mercenary group introduced, and I think that if you expand on that and properly give us these big goofy snake villains, that would be peak to me. And then maybe we get a Captain America 6 that adapts the Cold War event from the comics recently, and we can see Sam and Bucky have to go head-to-head against each other to take down the villainous Outer Circle. There is so much more you can do with this character, and I feel like he has a bright future in the MCU, and I hope that Marvel realizes that. And if they don't, I'll just fund the movie myself. Kevin Feige, please, get on the phone with me. I've got ideas, and I will go into debt for this. There's nothing I'm more committed to than this. I will do anything to see more of Sam's Captain America in the MCU. I had to wait 9 very long years since the last Captain America movie, and I don't think I can survive another 9-year wait. That's almost a decade of my life. They cannot put me through that again. And you know what, while we're speaking of the Captain America movies, let me give you my ranking of all 4 of them here. I think that Brave New World unfortunately does come in at the bottom. I can't stress this enough because I feel like people are only going to take away the negative things I said in this review, but I think the movie is good. It just happens to be competing with arguably one of the greatest trilogies of all time. So then coming in at number 3 would be Captain America the First Avenger, a movie that is near and dear to my heart. Number 2 is Captain America Civil War, incredible film, one of the best written Marvel Marvel movies out there. And then, to nobody's surprise, number one, Captain America the Winter Soldier, one of my favorite movies of all time, an absolute masterpiece. I've watched it an unhealthy amount of times. I might not be able to do my taxes or change a tire, but you better believe I can recite every line of that movie off the top of my head like it's nothing. I'm trying to think of how I can wrap this review up in a satisfying way, but I don't really think anything I do is going to put into words just how much this movie means to me. I've been ride or die for this film for a long time, through thick and thin, through the 22 days of reshoots to here, ready to put my life on the line to defend Sam Wilson's Captain America as a character who means the world to me, and someone that I've been dying to see soar once again. And while the movie might not be perfect, and definitely has its problems, I had a blast watching it. I think it's a really fun time. It's entertaining the entire way throughout. I never found myself bored. The only time I didn't have a smile on my face was when I was genuinely tearing up because of how good the emotional moments got to me. And yeah, maybe I'm biased, maybe I'm just a Marvel shill, maybe I'm a fanboy, but I don't care. Call me whatever you want. I had a great time with this movie, and I think that it's genuinely good. It's so special seeing a character you love finally get the spotlight they deserve, and I hope that everybody has something in life that makes them feel as happy as Captain America makes me. This is a character who I've looked up to for my entire life. From Steve Rogers to now Sam Wilson, I've spent years dedicating my time to learning everything I can about this character, reading the comics, watching the movies, doing all that I can, surrounding myself with Captain America. I bought the popcorn bucket and the cup for this movie. Alright, I'm that dedicated to it. I just love this stuff. If I had to give it a numerical rating on some scale, I would probably give it a 7.5 out of 10. I feel like that sounds pretty fair for my critiques and all that stuff, which I still think is a good rating. Just go form your own opinion. And if you hate the movie, that's fine. It's not for everyone. But for me, this is a lot more than just a movie, which might sound cheesy, but they did my favorite character right, and that makes me really happy. I feel like I'm repeating myself or getting too sappy, but I don't know, man. I love this character. I love Captain America, and I'm very happy with this movie. It's very special to me and will always be near and dear to my heart. I honestly don't know what I'm supposed to do now that this movie's out. I kind of made this thing my whole brand. I'm very excited for Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. I think they're going to be incredible films. Daredevil's coming right around the corner. We've got a lot to look forward to, but this movie was made for me, and this movie was something special to me, and I'll always treasure that. But that's enough of me yapping. I've been recording for the better part of 2 hours now. I've got a lot of editing to do, so I'm going to go ahead and end things there. Thank you all for watching. What did you think of Captain America Brave New World? I would love to hear what everyone has to say and continue the conversation down below, especially for a movie this divisive. And while you're at it, you may as well give the video a like and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you don't do it, I'm just gonna mind control you to do it, so you might as well do it with your own free will, but it's not like you have a choice. I'm Mr.